Hi, this is Privateer Station, and today we're bringing you another stream by former advisor to the Office of the President of Ukraine, Olexiy Arestovych, to Ukrainian journalist Vasyl Golovanov on his channel. This is Golovanov number 26 with Olexiy, and it's traditionally different Q&A, some of them pretty hard and provocative, so if you have more questions to ask, don't feel shy to leave them under this video. We'll gladly transfer them to Olexiy so he can answer them next time. Special thanks to our members who continue supporting our work. Today's kudos go to Vadim Cherdak and PSH. Thank you, guys. It would have been harder to continue doing this work without your support. And with this, enjoy. January 21st of 2024, live stream. This is 9:07 p.m. in Kiev. Olexiy Arestovych is with us. Good evening, Olexiy. Hello, good evening. Traditionally, to begin with, we send our thanks to the armed forces of Ukraine, who continue affording us to live, to work, and to breathe. All right, our viewers had a lot of questions. They were asking, checking if we're live. We're running a little late today, so my another traditional request, do not forget to subscribe to the channel of Olexiy, to his Telegram channel, to Instagram, and to Vasyl Golovanov's channel, of course, if you have enough energy left in you. And if you are listening or watching that in English language, do not forget to click the like button and subscribe for the Privateer Station. All right, I see a million comments here in the chat about $1 million in new house of that Olexiy supposedly purchased in California in USA, somewhere on the seashore, according to the publication. And I don't know what is the view of the ocean or McDonald's or whatever. Let's leave it to the dessert. We will ask this question, perhaps not in the very end of the stream, but let's not start with the tasty. You first eat the good food, and then the dessert is always last, okay? So, tell me, please, do you have good news overall? Is your mood today more in the minor or in major tone? You know, I'm trying to be very steady usually. I'm not swayed much. All right, let's check on a few things. Let's start with this. Attack of UAVs on Novatek terminal in Leningrad district in Russia was organized by Defense Forces, Special Forces of Ukraine. And the terminal, the oil terminal, is an important facility for Ukraine's enemy, where they process fuel, including for the military needs. And according to publications, they also attacked, UAVs attacked in Orlovskaya, Smolenskaya, and Tulskaya Oblast regions in Russia. And Ukrainian Intel Ministry confirmed that this is a planned attacks, and they clarify that these factories that were attacked are producing Panzer S systems. Local authorities in Russia have not declared any details on that accident, but there are videos and reports that it did happen. So what are we using to hit them so far? I don't know. People are saying there are some long-range UAVs that we were waiting for them for a while. I remember half a year ago, there were some attacks in Pskov on the division of the transport aviation that carries Russian paratroopers. That's where everybody said, hooray, we have long-range UAVs. But there were no more remote hits that far, about 1,000 kilometers deep into Russian territory. So, yeah, it again seems like that new stage for us, that Ukrainian armed forces and defense forces are using their expanding capabilities to hit Russian logistics deep inside, and that week became very successful in this regard, because we indeed hit several factories, powder producing factory, there was a big boom there, and we are responding to Russian aggression, if not exactly symmetrically, but at least in generally proper direction. That means the times when they could freely attack and use their advantage in long-range weapons to attack Ukrainian targets deep inside Ukraine. Those times are gone, and now we can attack their oil terminals, their refineries, their factories. We are raising the stakes. On the West, there is it sparked a new discussion. They're quite afraid that this might. They're quite afraid to scare Russia And then it turns out that little Budanov just does it regularly together with Zaluzhny, rising the stakes as far as they have to without even noticing. And that demonstrates what we demonstrated in the spring of 22, that we're not afraid when we sank their flagmanship Moscow and done many other good things. My position, I'm not rejoicing in the death of the enemies, but I'm rejoicing in the success of our military. So long consequences of these attacks is a little difficult to calculate in the war of that scale. And once again, it would be good if it would not be a one-time operation, but if we figure a way to maintain these hits on a systemic base, then Russian side will definitely run into a lot of issues with powder, with fuel, given the current pretty hard winter there, and even their infrastructure. From Vladivostok to Moscow, there were a lot of news about infrastructure collapsing and pipes bursting. So that only adds more grief and more trouble to their administration. Now, do Russia possess new opportunities to attack our targets? Did they display something new recently? No, they didn't. We are. So some of our capabilities are growing. How much of the parity it is, we'll yet to see, but the fact is that the war is becoming more expensive for them, and it's a very difficult proposition to cover their territory with defense systems, and they don't have enough resources to build a full shield of air defense, so they'll have to cover them object by object, and that means that our hits will continue, and they'll be rather successful, and they'll be blowing their schedules and plans and devoiding them of different material advantages. Is it honest? Yeah, I think so, because they attack us, we attack them. Well, the West was against attacking Russians with missiles, but do you think that we're using UAVs of our own production to hit Russian territory? Well, Vasil, missiles have very significant features that even civilian cannot miss. And that's one thing. The second, the West would not give us missiles that fly for 1,000 kilometers. Collective West, what's that word we used at school? Could be described with the word that starts with a P, then there is a double S and a Y at the end. That's a collective West, what they are. Right. I was trying to pick a different word, but yeah, they're very shy. Let's put it this way. They're very shy to supply us long-range missiles. All right, let's continue with next information. That Russians increased the number of missiles in the Black Sea, and right now the overall danger is heightened. Now they have enough carriers to launch up to 16 calibers at a time. What can we expect? Well, indeed, they are preparing for new strikes. The question is when that will happen. And we can see that they are using small groups of Shaheds, right? There are information about 20. We are more used to 60s and more overnight. That means that they're looking for new ways to navigate around our defense systems, and they're looking for ways where the missiles can go. When they think they'll be ready, they will strike. When, it's hard to tell, but we should be ready. Do you think Kiev, Olexiy, will be the main target of their attacks? Nobody knows, Vasil. Whenever we have a aerial threat announcement, we're even telling them which districts are potentially being targeted. I'm curious, has anyone of our viewers thought about where do we get the data about those risks? So how we do that is usually we calculate the radio electronic and the trajectory data, so we generally know what they're targeting. And I think if there'll be an attack of Kiev, there'll be 4 warnings as well, just like with any other district. So once again, Kiev is most protected area. Well, yeah, but it's the tastiest of them, right? Indeed, because there are a lot of targets here, and Kiev is an ambivalent situation here because on one thing, it is very well protected, on the other, it is being hit pretty often. So what do you connect with these lull in their strategy? It seems like initially they started with hundreds, then they went to 60s, now they're at 20s or even below that, at a dozen Shaheds at a time. Do you think they're accumulating them? Well, yeah, they're probably aggregating larger numbers, because in order to break through, you need a massive use of UAVs and missiles to oversaturate our aerial defense systems. So that's why they need to stockpile quite a few of them. Plus, I did say before that every launch of an airplane is not an easy task, because their planes are old. They're old. Missile that's leaving the jet is not a trivial operation. If several of them are leaving the plane, many things start to slowly fall apart. And, you have to fine-tune and correct and maintain and do a lot of things with it. It's not so easy in the country that's heavily sanctioned. To prepare for that, for an emergency strike, it's at least 2 days. And if it's a planned strike, it's even longer. It's probably 10 days or so. So they need to bring missiles. Of course, missiles are not stored at the airfield. They're hiding them from our attacks. So they need to provide logistics, make sure the crew is rested and ready. Jets are fueled. And Hot-22 missiles, they're powered by a very toxic, super toxic fuel. So the whole loading procedure is very peculiar with all the safety measures and all. So because of all that, and they're also doing intel, they're trying to gather some intel as to how to go around our air defense systems and which targets are available. So this is a fight of two systems, of two intels on both sides. They, for example, could know that we, and hypothetically speaking, that a couple of our systems defending Kiev may be going into maintenance next month. So they're trying to guess where, which side, is there any new opening in the system. So this is some sort of a complicated chess. This is not like in the old Western movie when you come to the bar and just shoot it up. This is a more delicate process, and the work starts long before the missile leaves the plane, long before the jet leaves the airfield. All right, let's go further. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the Chamber of Representatives of American Congress, said that the funding of Ukraine will only be resolved and addressed after the matter of the southern border is put to rest. I was talking about that since day one, and I will be talking about that again, said the politician. So what's with that package of 61 billion help to Ukraine? Yeah, the voting was planned for the 19th of January, but they have not agreed upon something apparently, and now they're moving the dates. Then there was information that Biden is going for some compromise, but that yet remains to be seen. So they are going through long internal discussions, and it's not just about the wall. The wall is rather material, and the demand is rather material, but the main push is also to work the immigration law into a stricter framework in the United States, so that it will not be flooded by illegal immigrants, and that kicks the stool from under the Democrats, because they've been separated into different states before. They were traditionally red, traditionally blue Democratic states, and they were that pattern state for quite a while. Then in recent times, around Obama, they succeeded by immigration, by internal migration, to flip several states into blue, and Republicans failed on a couple elections, and now they're seeing that they need to address that matter. So now they got the majority in Congress, and they're playing their game, trying to push the Senate, where Democrats are still strong, and the main power, the administrative power. So the fight there is very fiery, and it does have a lot of religious undertones, and it targets a lot of aspects. The wall on the border, the overall border penetration by illegals, the way illegals are treated, what law does about that, what border patrol can do about it. And Democratic Party is in a difficult pickle because they essentially risking to alienate their voter group. And Republicans know what they want. They concentrated on these demands, especially powered by the pro-Trump supporters. Part of Republicans, they're pushing for it seriously. And the fact that they cannot agree so quickly is absolutely not surprising. It would have been more surprising if they agreed quickly on that. Plus, the packages, Ukrainian and Israel packages, were united together as one until recently, and they don't want to vote these two difficult topics together, given the politics that Israel is conducting in Gaza and Democrats' questions about that. So I think at the end they will come to an agreement one way or another. Ukraine will get that aid, but I did say before, and I will say again, that likely it will not be anything more than 61 billion, probably less. And likely it'll be one package for this year. Very likely there will not be any support until next year. and we won't be getting individual packages later during this year. And military aid will be probably smaller as well. So we'll have to also find a way to properly spread these funds that we will receive and use them effectively. So that situation is very difficult from what was in 23 on 22. So if you're saying it will be late, what other risks are we talking about for Ukraine? If we take a social projection that Europe is trying to cover for us, but they still have to vote for those 50 billion that come from Europe, that's a necessity to print more hryvnia, to uncork our gold reserves. So they're actually already tapped in, so just faster use of them. That could also imply inflation, of course, delays in payments and social payments, which generally strains already difficult situation in the country. Plus mobilization, it does cost a lot of money. You also need to take them somewhere. And if it also includes a delay in military aid, then it also means deterioration on the situation on the front. We do have some reserves, and of course the situation will not fall dramatically within a month, but the longer the aid will be delayed, the more difficult situation will become. So you're saying that American aid would be limited and will be one time. They usually are the ones sending us missiles, right, for Patriot systems. Will that put us in a precarious position if they do not supply anymore this year? Well, Vasil, Patriots are also on service not only in the United States. Other countries have agreement with the United States that they can supply that to us, so we hopefully will be getting them enough. And Russian side is not ramping up their missile production, so we do not need to grow it exponentially, but it definitely creates another risk because it potentially can affect our capability to shoot down Russian attacks. Why such a disparity? 60 billion for 1 year from United States and 50 billion from Europe for 4 years. Well, Europe, Vasily, is poorer than United States, and it's more difficult for them to come to an agreement because in the United States, it's just Republicans and Democrats that have to agree. In Europe, there are over 30 powers that need to come to agreement, among which there is Fico, there are new rights in Holland, new rights in Belgium, new right winners in Italy. So there are a lot of different political forces that do not necessarily approve volumized and rich aid to Ukraine, continuous aid to Ukraine. So Poland is planning to send to Ukraine about 71 billion of what they aggregated. They were holding that money in the funds, the reserve funds, just to have some monetary resources for alleged violations of human rights that they needed to cover, but now they're being released. So, yeah, there's that. United States and Red Sea, Biden's administration is developing a longer and larger campaign against Hussites after the initial missile hits on their targets failed to preclude them from further attacks on shipping vessels in the area. And that area, of course, is supported by Iran. What do you think about the possibilities for these events to unfold in this region? It's difficult to say. Saudi Arabia was fighting with Yemen for a while, and they're armed with a rather good weaponry, yet they still lost it. And Yemen overall is like a desert akin to Mars in a way. It's difficult to hit military targets there. Of course, there are cities and some stockpiles and some military targets you can shoot. But we know very well, even on our own example, that it's not so simple to put the country on its knees just with remote weapons. So yeah, they did hit some targets, but Hussites still have a capability to use drones and to use ballistic missiles. Because Hussites, they are clients of Iran. Iran is leading the proxy war with their hands. And this is no joke. These missiles actually reach Israel. And there were cases when ballistic missiles were shot down by American fleet as well, which basically organized anti-drone local area defense. But through Aden Strait, there are 14% of world trade passing through, and that's a huge share. These things mean colossal losses for a lot of countries, some critical losses, and nobody will leave it be, right? Now the question about the naval blockade of their shore and the attacks and hits by American Navy, how effective will that be? How effectively will the transport ships be covered with that activity? It's a big and not trivial question, and I'm rather pessimistic in the outcome of just a naval operation against them. That these actions will be able to control Hussites, and ultimately what it will lead to the increase of insurance rates to the degree that companies will not cannot afford themselves to ship. To remind our listeners, this is part of the doctrine, so-called, of General Soleimani, Iranian one, who was killed by American Special Services, military, and at his grave, ISIS blew up 2 bombs on the 3rd of January, and there were 60 casualties. So it looks like Soleimani is dead, but his deed is still very much alive. And Iran is basically tearing the resources of United States and Britain and EU onto different areas, where they need to expand more and more. They already have Israel, they have Ukraine, and now the Hussites are coming to the stage. If there'll be one more coming up, I have concerns if they will not abandon one country to make sure they can pull through with the others, even if it's just a proxy warfare. Because if it would be a conventional one, they would barely be able to carry out one, and they would have to drop 2 others. So the question is, who will be dropped? Okay, Olexiy, not a comfortable question to think about. Another question, you're writing a lot about mobilization, the work of mobilization committee, and I'll base this question on the statement by Zelensky, who says that he is not seeing enough information from General Command that there is a real need for 500,000 Ukrainians on the front. And he also states that he is sure that mobilization is needed to replace and rotate the military on the front. So, Olexiy, how many people need to be mobilized in the coming year, and what will happen with the law, you think, and with the procedure of mobilization, how it will be organized? All right, Vasil, it's only military specialists who know how much they need. We know they stated they need 500,000. And here, our president supposedly did his own recalculation of that and coming out saying that he doesn't see where 500,000 would fit. So mobilization is a difficult proposition, and he indicated economic issues related to that and also justice issues related to that. He needed to bring it up because there was a lot of blowback where the justice was definitely a message, and I guess signals reached the office, so now he has to address that matter. Today he is talking on the topic of lack of need to mobilize 500,000. Then, all right, if not 500, if I was the correspondent, I would have asked the follow-up question. If not 500, how many? And then if they think it'll be easier to mobilize 300,000 or 200,000, I don't think so. Same thing, it's money, it's organizing everything, logistics of it. And what I would be mostly curious to know is how are they going to replace the military on the front with the new recruits? How will their rotation be happening? I understand it's a secret element, there's an element of secrecy to all that, but just hypothetically, if you replace a difficult part of the front, everybody there with new recruits, they will not be able to hold it. And that means that you will have to leave the core resources there and then bring new ones. And, you know, in the more successful brigades, that's exactly what's happening. There are some troops being brought in on rotation, and then there is a core of sergeants and officers that is still staying, and some of the servicemen who train people. And there are different proportions. There is 20-80, there is 40-60, where the smaller number is the well-experienced core, and the bigger number is the amount being rotated. So I'm not quite sure how people will be given time to rest and how the rotation is going to happen. So I have not seen the answers to that yet. If I was a journalist, I would be asking this question from president, because until these questions are answered, it is just a beautiful formula to speak about. As somebody who has some connections to military, I see a lot of issues there. And I think it's a very symbolic phrase for the most part, just to upkeep the fighting spirits, because I do not see a clear path how to rotate 300,000, how to withdraw them from the front and replace them with the ones who are not trained. And that procedure will be creating enough risks for a collapse of our front in certain parts. All right, Olexiy, what would you do? Okay, one of the variants, there were some messages coming from British media that we are building our defense lines about 20-25 kilometers away from the current front line, and we're building that fortification on a large scale and very rapidly. So perhaps if we indeed inhabit these fortification lines with new recruits, that would be a good first step. But many of them still would have no skills, no fighting skills, so they would need to be trained and prepared. And it is a slow process. I can give an example how Brits changed their core of their groups in Afghanistan, how they were training local Afghani special services. So they initially had a group of 14, and they were adding 2 Afghanis to them, who were fighting with them, learning and getting experience. Then they were taking 2 Brits out, putting 2 more Afghanis in, and at the end there would be 2 Brits left with about 12 or 14 Afghanis in it. And that procedure roughly took them about a year. So theoretically we could do that. For example, we have a mechanized company, just theoretically, and we remove 10 people. We use rotation to remove them, bring 10 more. Then as these first 10 get enough experience, we rotate 10 more out of the group and bring 10 more newbies. And you can imagine how long and how tedious the process is, right? And you'll get some blowback from people, because they'll be the ones who will be the last ones to be rotated, and they'll be upset because, the others are being removed and they're still fighting. Or there'll be other parts of the front where we probably won't be able to do that immediately. For example, in the areas where the most difficult fighting is happening, if you are smart, you would not be doing it quickly there. You'd have to be very careful and very gradual. Otherwise, the risk of collapsing the front would increase. And this is a difficult proposition. Very few armies of the world have even tried that during the last 50 or 70 years. So it could have been just a beautiful formula about justice. Of course, there'll be some rotation happening, but I want to just warn our citizens that it will not be fast. Do not await all of your brothers, sons, fathers, cousins back home quickly. And this will create additional strain, additional fault lines. It will not look like a fair and just maneuver. And like now, there are brigades that haven't been rotated since February, and there are others who've done 12 or 14 rotations. It will depend upon the commanders of specific detachment, and the justice will not look like what people expect it to be. There will be some logic behind it, but it'll take some guts to accept it. All right, Alexei, so not with dark colors, but with some elements of hope, even though scattered around. Okay, guys, let's go to your questions. I remember your question for today about Alexei's house, but still. I want to ask you, Olexiy, which of the states do you like more if you are to move to the United States? Why California? Well, that's an interesting question. I'm the person who is talking about the possible civil war, big war, civil conflict. Would you be buying a house in a country where a big civil conflict is looming? No, probably not. Right. Okay, so second, I'm standing generally on the Republican positions, what you can correlate to American politics, and don't quite like what Democrats are bringing there. LGBT propaganda, all these bums on the streets, a lot of garbage not being taken care of in democratic cities, but very clean in Republican ones. And California is the bluest of the democratic blue in the whole country. So, how do you think a person who is publicly against all these lefty propaganda elements, do you think he would settle in the state where every second window has rainbow flags in the window and his neighbors on the left and the right will have these flags? And there'll be those demonstrations and everything that I, to say the least, do not accept. Well, how about you infiltrate and change it? Right? Change the system from inside, exactly. So, and let's address that question. The one that was published, that house, it's not in California, it's in Florida. You can actually see that on the screen if you bring it up in real estate's app. You can see it. 55th Avenue, Hollywood, Florida, right? So that's an address in a different state, already not Cali. And here's the data from American Registry. And as you see, the owner is not Arestovych. It's a little difficult to see on that screen, Olexiy. I opened it full screen. See here? Avi Babayev and Svetlana. There is a name Svetlana as the second donor. Right, yes. Dual allegiance of that house. So guys, if you don't know how it works in the United States, first of all, in this accusation, they use logic saying that I saved my money somewhere on Cayman Islands and withdrew them to buy a house in the United States. Do you think it's possible operation for the United States if you can buy money on the gray scheme, if you can buy a house on a gray scheme money in the US, if it's easy? And then also after the open deal, you will see the owners of this property in the registry. So then one has to determine the relation of that owner. I'm not risking to pronounce his name, and that respectable lady Svetlana. And then second thing, do not look for my house in California. That will be silly. Perhaps Florida then, right? And then again, await the registry, see changes. They might take about a month usually, but yeah. And I had a question about the price. Yeah, the price says in the post, they said that the house is worth $1,400,000 and it was sold for $749,000, and it's a quarter acre. Right. What tripped me here is that they said that first of all, it's California. They could have just said, "Hey, it's Florida." Second, this house is not in my taste. I would, even if I would be looking to shop, I would not buy this specific one. Olexiy was also preparing for that stream, and I went to look up the initial source of this information. It's the page of some Kostyuk Vasilyevich. He's an attorney, according to this page, and that person reported that he purchased a house in the United States, in California, for $1 million, and published this picture. Several websites of doubtful reputation reposted that. Not a single serious agency posted that as well. And the first message on this account by the attorney appeared just about a month ago, actually less than a month. Perhaps the account exists longer, but the first public post appeared there less than a month ago. During that time, there were 13 posts, and some of them were just reposts of some other stuff. And among them, the last 3 are about Arestovych. And about the house, how evil are you, and how much money have you saved from taxes and stowed away. Another publication, Apostrophe, referencing that same Kostyuk, elaborated more, and I'll show some on the screen, if you can see that. So what they're writing is that during 3 years of participating in Ukrainian politics, he aggregated over $3 to $5 million. That's what Apostrophe is writing. And what is interesting, that in Facebook, by that Vasil Kostyuk, He wrote not 3 or dash $5 million, but his initial message was $1 million. And they're making a screen of his initial post. And his post says that during 3 years of participating in Ukrainian politics, he saved about $1 million. As the first line on the screen. So it just blatantly is seen that there is a source that's saying a million, then whoever is reprinting that, they're probably, you can see their line of thinking, well, 1 million is not enough. He spent about that on this house. He needs more. And I was thinking maybe Kostyuk edited his post. I went to check his post, and no, he did not. There is one post among his things edited, but this one was left intact. So that story looks cheap, like a really cheap news production, fake news production. And I think if I was you, it's, it's upsetting they didn't even try. Yeah, Vasil, they're lazy. And we should mention that factor here, that people are in Ukraine are eager to eat all kind of things. And it's sad, because the brains of my compatriots are definitely a target for attacks. And second element is, what button in the collective psyche this button is pushing on? The hatred to rich? All right, imagine that I indeed made this 3-5 millions and bought a house for $1 million. If it was legal, what is wrong? Right? Evaded taxes? Well, then there are mechanisms to do that. You can write to the economic department, to congressmen, let them start the audit and find a hryvnia that I did not pay and that I withdrew from the country without paying taxes. So the fact itself, and I think the core of this message is to hit the imagination of the poor reader who's barely surviving on 20,000 hryvnias a month, with a price tag of $1 million. But I want to say here that I do know the prices in Ukrainian politics. And even if I did make money, these 3 or 5 millions during my time in the president's office, then I'm either an idiot or I'm a saint. I remember in one TV series, there was a patrol officer who was not taking bribes, and he always had a halo around his head and the bullets were not capable to hit him. So that would be some kind of that figure. So if I was really intent on making money through that, you would need to remove the dash, and then it would be somewhat real. Otherwise, 3-5, it's a spit in the face. And frankly, in California, for $1 million, you can buy a roach-infested something. The prices in Cali are very different, so they're very wrong about the price setting. And what can I say? Today is 100 years since the death of Vladimir Lenin, and I think they decided to press the button of hatred of poor to the rich, and perhaps whoever concocted this fake news were hoping to make a country that hates the rich. And I can only say, well, 100 years after Lenin, not many things have changed, and whoever is peddling this subject, and it's, I suspect, one of our politicians who is behind it, they do not understand that when they set these fires up, they will be the ones where people will look and say, oh, but what about your house for $30-50 million? And I can easily name several names who have a carpet that cost $1 million in their house that they purchased abroad. So, yeah, a very yellow story. And in this story, what was surprising to me, Olexiy, $1 million, right? You could have been at least more inventive, like 1.3 or 35 or something. Right, they could have posted something like 999. It's almost like, it's almost like some child was writing this post and just being very upset. Oh, $1 million. And then, the next wave decided that $1 million is not enough. Let's not have any pity to his enemies, and let's write that he made 3 or 5. Why do you think that it's a hatred to the rich that is behind this message as well? That's a secondary aspect to it. Well, it's directed at me, right? They need to keep setting my persona on fire, and they need to stir that pot, because Arestovych wasn't hated enough in the last week. And then the other aspect is we're dying here. We're not capable to buy anything in Ukraine. We need to save money. We don't have enough for sustaining our livelihood. And that damn MFR is buying his houses over in the country, in the United States. And yeah, if they were smarter, right, they could have attacked differently. They could have just attacked the real. If Arestovych is for conservative values, they could have said that he is now has some same-sex lover and they're practicing orgiastic rituals on the Bible or something. Well, these fake news, they usually don't fly high, and it's just people expending money and effort on this ridiculous, stupid shit. All right, let's not waste the valuable resource of our viewers, their time, and go to the next questions. We're actually very thankful that you are spending that time with us. So let's go to other questions. Olexiy, why Crimean Bridge, Kerch Bridge is still standing? Well, because we don't have the right means to destroy the bridge and to penetrate the aerial defense systems that Russia put around it. It's a very non-trivial task. Is there any perspective or any tools that we could use to destroy it? Well, if we're given 100 Atacams and maybe 60 Tauruses, then perhaps we'll put it down. Why so much? Well, you calculate it this way. 9 out of 10 will likely be shot down of the missiles. And to reliably destroy it, you need about 10 or 20 hits, preferably near the same target. So in order for 20 of them to hit it, you need at least 200 to be launched, right? 10%. Or at least 100. Or, that's the math you need. That operation, that SBU operation to blow it up, that was a very distinguished achievement because without having proper means, like I just described, we figured a way to disable it for quite a bit of time. And this was a definite military achievement, a diversion that problematized supply lines for the southern group of Russian troops at the moment of the most key operation there when we were taking Kherson back. So, yes, we can congratulate Vasily Maluk with that achievement, who organized that. This is definitely an amazing story. And now that they actually are controlling and they have increased the defense of the bridge, remember we tried to attack it with above water drones. They now created the system to defend it from the naval surface. And now we predominantly have the means to get to that. The only way to get to it is via aerial attack. But we don't have these missiles. In Germany, they recently voted. They denied Taurus missiles to Ukraine. Americans are giving us some Atacams, but again, quantities, that's still a question. So, all right, let's continue. But before we do so, let me remind our viewers to click the like button. We have about 35,000 watching us live. We only have 7,000 likes. So guys, please press this like button. I'm not collecting them. That's just the YouTube algorithms that we would like you to help us with. Olexiy, why your statement that the price of joining NATO is the war with Russia? Why is it only applicable to Ukraine? Because there are other countries too. Now Finland joined NATO, right? And what? Well, don't mix Ukraine, that was at least for 300 or 400 years in a different format, a part of Russian Empire. And Gitman structure had more independence, but still it was about 400 years. And Helsinki also doesn't fight with Russia for the center of Russian civilization. And Kiev actually does. So they have very different account for Ukraine, and they treat us very differently than Georgians, Estonians, Lithuanians, Finnish people, Poles, and anybody else whom they have the border with. For them, us and Belarus people are, and I'm expressing their point of view, are the same people who were deceived and were treacherously pushed or pulled or being tried to pull to the West. Finns were always part of the Russian Empire, but they were never a core system-making part of it. So this is an old and painful story of codependent relations, and that's why they see that question of Ukraine very differently. For them, Finland joining NATO is a threat, and they'll react to that. But Ukraine joining NATO is a catastrophe, a moral, symbolic, historic, religious, anything you like. That's why the degree of resistance is very different. Olexiy, why are you saying about the problem of Ukraine and Ukrainian power, government, but very little is addressed in regards to Russia? Well, because everybody is talking about Russia and Russian problems. From all sides, you can hear that. Even in Russia, they're talking about some of their problems. But my goal is to change us, not change Russia. That's why I'm talking about our problems. Alexei, do you think Ukraine will be able to pull through an out-of-bloc status? If yes, then how? For that, we need a total change of mind. And the question is, who will be doing that? Who will be establishing the conditions and goals? I think I can pull it through. Without myself, I cannot guarantee that, but I'm talking about my project, right? It's, what else can I discuss here? I have my position. I do not think Ukraine should be under Russia. I do not think Ukraine should be under the West. I think we are independent and strong country. And if you dig deeper, actually a proto-civilization that can give a lot of good lessons, not only to Russia, but even to the West as well. And if we are managed properly, we would be able to project security for the whole Europe being in the neutral status. Dear Alexei Nikolaevich, what do you think about an opinion that only economic and political exhaustion of aggressive Russia and mad Putin will stop this war in Ukraine? It's seems to be very little left that organized civilized world need to establish proper supply lines to help Ukraine win. Well, when they ask this about simply, whenever you hear the word simple and just put that in quotes, because all these stories that they're very reminiscent about the Purple Light by Postovsky, the story, where he was describing 2 months that he lived in Kiev when Skoropadsky government was replaced with Petlura government. And he's describing Kievan citizens as very depressed ones who would only be swayed and somewhat energized by another rumor that the West is coming to save them. And for a few hours, they would be believing, and then it would exhaust itself, and they would be very upset and very comatose until the next rumor. So people were really afraid that Bolsheviks, when they come, there'll be executions, and Petlura people, before they left, they invented a rumor about some secret purple rays from France that they could use on the fields where the Bolsheviks would be advancing and everybody would fall dead. So that's like a hyperboloid of engineer Garin, the other story about the laser or whatever other rays they were used. So they told the Kievans to expect that purple light in the sky, and that would mean the victory. So half the Kiev was waiting and sitting and waiting for that ray. And all these things about, well, just organized, or simply win, all that is being crushed by the fact that the Russian missile has 70 plus components manufactured in America. What else do you need to believe that the West is not fully on our side? Another thing, I keep saying that when the West awakens, it doesn't imply that it will awaken with Ukraine in its mind. And here's the next question, Alexei. What is the prognosis for Ukraine if Trump becomes the president? It is difficult to say. Trump is the figure who is probably not aware of the details of his foreign politics. It'll be decided later. And he might actually leave NATO. He already voiced that threat, saying that Europe did not spend enough. They did not even spend 2% that they all agreed upon. They reserved that money to increase their quality of life. And especially for the last 30 years, it was pulled almost entirely by the United States. He started with all that BS. He is an isolationist in this regard. And if, for example, he can quit NATO, he's another figure, though, who would also try to ask Putin to stop the war. And if the Putin doesn't, then he could transfer us 500 atoms. And he's that kind of figure, controversial in many things. And he was expected even in his previous time in the office that he would be doing different behavior, but it's under him that Soleimani was assassinated. And when Iran threatened more, then he brought up nuclear bombers in the air, and he had to turn them later when Iran came back to its senses. So Trump is actually rather highly valued by American military establishment, special services, intel, and military. They understand that this guy will not be silent like Biden administration. In the last couple months, there were over 100 hits on American bases in the Middle East. Biden government is not answering. Trump would have answered. For him, it would not be acceptable that American soldiers are being attacked without any retaliation. So it'll be interesting to see what decisions he can make, but definitely the risks are growing for everybody, and these risks can be positive and negative. We don't know. All right, next question from the viewer. Do you think United States have enough resources for the war with Iran? No, I don't think they do. I doubt Americans can conduct a successful warfare against Iran. They cannot fully subdue Iran by aerial strikes because it's a mountainous country where a lot of targets hidden in the mountains and rather fortified, so good luck hitting that. And they have their own almost full cycle military production, and they have hypersonic missiles too. Well, their warheads travel at hypersonic speeds on the final stage of flight, and these are the weapons they have potential of destroying American aircraft carrier. And how America will react to a sunken carrier, I don't know, because I suspect that under current administration, at least, there would not be any noble rage like after Pearl Harbor, but they might actually withdraw and concede whatever Iran is demanding. So going back to Ukraine, why people from mobilization committee do not have special uniform to distinguish them from military? Because people are starting to be afraid of people in military uniform on the streets. Oh, I addressed this topic before. The fact that the employees of Central Mobilization Committee, the military servicemen actually are engaged in forced recruitment in the processes. This is one of the biggest flaws in that system right now, because what it does, it creates additional fear whenever they see a person in the uniform with our citizens. They should be experiencing gratitude when they see a soldier, and instead that breeds a whole other emotion. Military are not the ones who should be getting people off the streets. There should be local administration, police, and the other resources used. Military should not be doing that. And as usual, bureaucrats do not want to suicide their political careers, so they dumped everything on the military. And that's what they're doing, and it's a function that doesn't belong to them. So it's just politicians figured out how to do that without losing their ratings, and army would be getting kicks by society. And army said yes, sir, and is now carrying it out. Unlike us, Russia is not doing that with military. If it is done with police or with Russian guard, so they're not military. And they tried that. They actually had one of the military commissars assassinated, and the guy who did that was recently sentenced to 19 years in colony. And they understood quickly that this destroys the image of military and breeds mistrust to that institute, and they decided to use new forms instead of that. And unlike them, here we only exacerbated the problem, so people are now being afraid of military. They should be actually wanting to come to a military and shake their hands and hug them, and kids want perhaps to touch an officer or soldier. So unlike that, we now have people running away from everybody in the military uniform on the street. So it would be interesting if the commission, when it will be investigating the issues and processes and errors during that war, I would be very delighted to see that question answered. I'll make sure it does get there. Very embossed font. Figure out who is using army for that function. This is not their responsibility. They should not be involved in this. They should not be seeing recruits until they arrive to the reporting station. So, next question. What do you think Danilov's phrase means that there is no opposition in Ukraine? Oh, I don't know. Olexiy Danilov probably sees it better. A lot of political figures will probably disagree with him on this, with the head of the Security Commission, right? Petro Poroshenko, Yulia Leonidovna, and several other prominent figures will probably seriously disagree with him on this point. But we'll see how it unfolds. Olexiy, how do you combine your religiousness and the cussing that you often do. Well, I somehow do. Sunday Times is estimating the average Ukrainian warfighter age to be 43 years old. Do you think it's realistic? Oh, yeah, it is. In the infantry, the average age is 45, 46, which is also a big problem, because military experts of the whole world are saying that if you will not be conscribing youth, you will have big problems. And we are preserving our youth. I don't know what for. Perhaps so that in the parts of Russian Putin's army, they would be marching towards Europe later, if we fail. No, please don't breed the yellow press cutouts from this stream. Oh, I can quote our president in Davos. You don't need to quote Arestovych or Haas or somebody else, or Ben Hodges. You can quote now Zelensky, who said in Davos that Ukraine may fail if you do not support us, and then Russia will use its resources to continue steamrolling further to the west. Or do you think that Zelensky is a Russian agent too? I'm a little lost here with who's the agent currently. Another question about Davos. So your attitude to the free model of the government that a president of Argentina was talking about in Davos. Well, it's a good story. We can talk about that at length, but in politics, one of the main questions is not what, but who. Who will build you a free libertarian state like in Argentina they're going to right now? If our businesses get their balls tighter and tighter day after day, you'd think they would be loosened, but no, they're tightening it more. Other countries are assimilating our people rather successfully, and it's only Ukraine that's doing everything so that our best and brightest would leave. So what better world are you talking about? It's almost as if we're going in the opposite direction. Why Ukraine is not attracting private military companies to participate in the war against Russia from the other countries? Well, not all of them want to participate to start with. Private military corps, they're usually about something else, about guarding oil refineries and resource mining facilities, about protecting VIP persons, about protecting journalists and some sites in the country. But fighting in the full conventional warfare, they did not go into that profession to do that. They go to private military companies to make money. If they have to fight, they will fight, they will shoot, but they're not doing it as a systemic warfare. And if you expect that PMC would go to the part of the front where in 2 weeks you need to rotate the battalion because it's almost completely destroyed and pulled apart, they're not about that. They're going there for different motivation. There are foreign volunteers, those we use. Well, there are just not many of them, right? True, and even volunteers do not really want to go to the most difficult parts of the front. It's a very specific story. So you wrote another post about a statement by Kuleba, who said that Ukraine will finish this work, just give money and resources, and the West will not have to waste their resources and people in that war. You were basically saying the same thing about a year ago. So why that attitude now? Well, look, I have a very good relation with Dmitry Kuleba personally, really good one. So I'm not sure that statement that he expressed, whether it was his or whether he was asked to voice the official position. And by the way, he's one of 4 people who can speak for Ukraine: President, Prime Minister, Head of Congress, and Foreign Affairs Minister. So when he makes statements and voices ideas that are perhaps not even his, he takes ownership of them. And the real phrase did sound a little different. I did link in my post to the news. His real words were sounding a little different, but the Telegram channel Insider that published it actually pulled some meaning that could be derived from his statements. And what I don't like is that Ukraine is being preserved as private military, as being positioned as a private military company for the West, right? Give us money, we'll do the work. This is a very low ball, actually. Our country, the country that was baptized by Apostle Andrew, we are the land that was baptized by Apostle Andrew. Our church is Apostolic Church. Even Thomas is a step down for us. because after apostolic level, that would be like if Rockefeller decided to go to some boondocks as the president of collective farm. So we're the country that imposed taxes on Byzantium Empire back in the day, even before Russia was Christianed. So when they're saying that we were some heathens, heathens do not bring 2,000 ships and do not nail a shield to the gates of Constantinople with a prohibition to remove it. And that's why we have the full right to talk to anybody and be at least on the equal position. Kiev was one of the most populated cities of medieval. Anna Yaroslavna was teaching the French king to write. So we forgot all that, and now we're positioning ourselves as a big PMC that will do the work for them. This is not a good vector. What was I saying, right? Back to that I was taking the same position, supposedly. I was bringing that position up early in the days of war, when it was not clear what the West will do. And I was calling upon the West to take that position, to support us. One can say that Kuleba is sending somewhat a similar message now, but he, unlike many others, I think needs to realize that the West is not in this position. We are fighting this war. The West is trading and fighting a little bit with our hands. They're even buying Russian oil. They're selling them electronic chips. Do you read reports of the commission McFall Yermak? They're printing a lot of things with infographics that in Russian arms, there are only 14% of spare parts produced in Russia. Everything else is purchased in the West. And for God's sake, not in China, on the West. What sacred or dangerous war you're talking about for the West, us fighting for them? It's not asking us to do it. It's selling parts to Russia. People, you just don't understand the choice that we're standing at, that we have to confront. There is no West that wants to destroy or defeat Russia. There's no collective unity there. They never took that position, and they're not taking it still. It's us who are trying to implore them to give us resources and military equipment so we can carry it out, but they're not in a rush. And for us, they're barely scraping 50 billions all across the whole Europe, when the question is our survival in fight with Russia. That's the attitude of the West too. The blockade of border with Poland, the blockade of border with Romania, this is the relation of the West to us. We should not be thinking that all propaganda and all the government messaging is bad. It serves the purpose, but the problem is that it's not designed for us to believe in our own propaganda. It's wrong to do so. We should be producing that, and we should be requesting funds and help, but we should not be getting under that propaganda ourselves and starting to believe that the West is with us and they're fully helping us. At the beginning of war, it was a bit different story. Everybody were amazed at our resilience. They were implementing sanctions against Russia. There was some vision that perhaps they are even going to defeat it, at least with sanctions, and support us militarily. But right now, the situation is different. And today we only have a sect of dreamers about a woken West, but you know my point of view. I do not share that. First of all, it is not going to wake up. Second, if it does, it will not be doing that in our interest. And I want to explain here, I'm not a Russian spy. I'm not a Western spy. I'm a Ukrainian spy. I gave my oath to Ukrainian people. And I don't need any other country besides Ukraine, and I will be back to Ukraine rather soon. And I would pay dearly to see the faces of those who are telling stories about Arestovych fleeing and buying real estate in California. So my story is very simple. We ourselves are representatives of the country with a great history. Because the answer to the question, who are we, stems from history. Our today leadership in Ukraine, they are not looking deeper than Ukraine National Army of the 20th century. And this only addresses maybe the ideology of 20% of our country citizens. What about the rest 80? And this is one of the problems when 20% pretend that they are 80%, that they're 100%. It is not so. Some other people are saying that we are going from Cossacks and from Cossacks culture. Do you know what Taras Bulba would have done to us if he magically would have risen today? He would look around and say, wait a sec, we've been fighting for millennia for our Orthodox religion, and now you're selling yourself to the Westerners against the other foe. And we might find ourselves looking into our historic figures and leaders who'd be asking very harsh questions of the current leadership. And you can read Taras Bulba's speech about camaraderie. Gogol has written out most of our painful points in history in that speech. So reread that if you can. So, lyrical step back. Where did the Kievan Brotherhood come from? Where did Lvov Brotherhood come from? These things, brotherhoods, did not exist before. And I want to explain that they happened because our elites, Shlyachtas, they were always looking towards Poland and the West, and they were always a factor of treason for the country. They were often giving up the country for some benefits for themselves. And the core of that break apart was set by Vytautas, who was the ruler of Lithuanian Duchy, a superpower of its time. But for Polish crown, in order to add a little bit of land to his ownership, he took Catholicism, and he split the elites from the people. And that started not in 1991 and not in 2004 during the first Maidan. It started in 1385, and it's still going. So Cossacks and Sagaidachny, basically the second Sviatoslav figure, he took Moscow by force. He destroyed the army in the 22nd year, led by the Sultan himself. So he took all Zaporozhye army and joined Kiev and got brotherhood. There were maybe 300 of them, but he joined it with the whole army so that brotherhood would not be trampled, because all the political figures of that time were afraid of his army. So you're forgetting that, or you don't want to now be part of the Cossack background? So those who are keeping the Institute of National Memory and trying to split the government budget for that and telling us who are Ukrainians, how about they take note of these events and go deeper in the history? And I did read the speech at Feldman's stream about the brotherhood. Everything is written out there, verbatim. So to wrap this up, somebody wrote in the commentary addressing me, asking, how do you feel like in the role of Andrei who ran to the polls? I want to say, you're wrong. I'm not in that role. I'm in the role of Taras Bulba. You guys are collectively in the role of Andrei, who are running for the West and who are running there from Russia. I am not going for Russia, and I'm not going for the West. My bet is on Ukraine, the country that is underestimated, that has only had a chance to present 25% of its capacity, productive, creative, etc. If helped right, this country can shine and can give an example, can set a shining example for the whole Eastern Europe. Now, we can still conduct this war, if do it right, and get the results we want. We just need to actually start working it. And when people are saying that I should fall in love with the West, guys, I know the West rather deep, much deeper than most of you. I did take a deep dive into the realities of the West, so don't pay any illusions to it. When there'll be no American parts in Russian Kinjal, then we can talk about the West that will absolutely help us, will take a good position, a little bit more, and they'll awaken. We need pro-Ukrainian politics, not pro-Russian, not pro-Western, pro-Ukrainian. All of our troubles, and Russia is sent to us by God as a punishment because we are the people of traitors. And the ideology of treason is popular in Ukraine. But whom do you think we are traitors to? To Russia? No, to ourselves, because we refused from being who we are. And the Cossacks are turning in their graves, Sagaidachny, Khmelnytsky, Bulba, Baida, Vishnevetsky, looking at who we're turning into. And they would probably keep things in order if they were alive. I'm not even talking about the Knyaz figures, Monomach and Yaroslav. So a collective Andrei should not be presented as the core of Ukraine. Our core is different. And in order for us to remember about ourselves, the God sent Russia to us. That keeps reminding us about it. And I want to say that one of my first impressions from the lawlessness of what's happening was when I saw how Motorola, one of those pro-Russian separatists, was executing Ukrainian officers. That bum who was picked from some abandoned car wash, who got a right to execute and to pull the epaulets of Ukrainian officers and make them eat them. It doesn't mean that he is horrible. He is, but it means that we are being punished with this story. It means that we are responsible because we are traitors to ourselves. And if there comes a question, what is with that treason ideology? I think because we are prisoners to ourselves, to our core. And I'm fighting to try to make us stop going in that direction. And you are walking in a different way, dear listener, whoever left this comment. Because we have a full right to stand upright and carry out the weight on our shoulders. So don't tell me that I'm a traitor to Ukraine. You are. I'm Bulba here, and you're Andrei. All right. Before we conclude our stream today, we're on the second hour. In parallel to our stream, I got a signal from United States, a message in my personal social, that Nikki Haley is leaving her election campaign, and Trump is now the official Republican leader. Well, look, I don't see any alternative to Trump among Republicans. For a while, there was a bit of fight, and there were some candidates who could have presented certain competition to Trump. This fight was going for over 4 years, basically from the day when he stopped being a president. For a bit of time, the opposition was strong. Some of the older Republicans were shocked by the manner of him, how he conducted things. And today, anybody who is going to present anything reasonable in opposition to Trump, he would be smitten by an overall opinion. Iowa is a good example. 100% voted for Trump. So basically, I think if Trump is not removed from the election campaign by a court, by assassination or something, he will carry out the ball together with the enemy's goal post out of the field. And DeSantis evaluated his capabilities properly, and Nikki Haley is now finally joining that as well. So don't have any illusions. If there'll be elections, chances are it will be Trump running the country. And okay, do you have a fundraiser today, Olexiy? Yes, we are gathering money for the vehicle that would take special services to the front line and back. It's a small fundraiser, only 150,000 hryvnias. It will be under my video. We usually close them within 3 to 5 minutes, so we'll be putting the next one. Our line is very too much to the north of 70 requests, so we're trying to put them all out as we close the first ones. All right, friends, we also have another link to another fundraiser on my video version on Golovanov channel for 72nd Brigade for the Mavic drones. Thank you, everybody. Personally, out of 41,103 viewers who watched us live and those who are watching that recorded, Olexiy, thank you so much for dedicating your time to us and to our viewers every week. And today is a traditional Sunday stream. We usually do the Saturday stream, right? But thank you for giving us an opportunity to ask these questions. Our viewers do appreciate this format. And I separately thank you for this opportunity. All right. Thank you. Guys, take care. Ukraine will prevail. Till we meet again, and have a quiet and boring night to all those who are in Ukraine.